Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at classicstoday.com. We've been doing a series, and it's a very interesting series, I think, about great recordings of the classics for the new millennium, performances that have been recorded past the year 2000, and that show us that for all the complaints and whining and hysteria, our classical music performance culture is still in pretty good shape as regards the core repertoire of classical music. However, there is always the flip side, and that is works that I think are really going to be problematic to receive great performances in the 21st century. And so it's only fair that we spend a little time looking at some of those. And the first, for me anyway, my prediction that there will be very, very few fine performances in the 21st century is Schubert's ninth or eighth, depending on what you do it, but Schubert's Great C Major Symphony. Now, the Great C Major Symphony is problematic even in the best of times. It's an extraordinarily difficult piece to do well. Always has been. There are few great performances. There are billions of horrible ones. But you could get decent ones most of the time, and most people sort of had their brains around it. But there are reasons for this. The reasons are really very fascinating. Schubert's symphonies divide into two rather schizoid parts. There are symphonies 1 through 6, which are obviously based on music by Haydn and Beethoven. Those are their models. They're very classical, small scale, lovely works, beautiful works. And of these, only the fifth really entered the basic repertoire and got performed with any frequency. It's a beautiful work. It still does it, and it does well. It's going to do well. It's fine. It's Mozartian as long as we're playing, Mozart's G minor symphony. We're going to be able to do Schubert's fifth, and it's going to come out just fine. No problem. Then, at the opposite end of the scale are two works, the Unfinished Symphony, which has some of the same problems as the ninth, but not quite as many because it's not quite as long. And then the ninth. And the ninth is the kicker, the killer. And the reason for that is that it doesn't belong to this classicizing tradition at all. It's late Schubert. It's Schubert at his most Schubertious. It's full of Schubertitude. It's Schubertalicious. There's nothing like it. It just popped out of his head in a sense. It's this huge, grand, really romantic, forward-looking piece of music. And because of that, you can't apply the same approach to it that you do these earlier, more classical type pieces. It has many, many, many tricky performance issues. Let's talk about some of them, shall we? There is the relationship between the tempo of the introduction and the main allegro. Should they be in strict proportion? Should the introduction be slower or the allegro faster? How do you do it? How do you create the necessary energy? Do you do a real accelerando going into the allegro? Do you keep the tempo reasonably steady but somehow indicate the increase in energy? It's hard to do. And neither approach is necessarily right. It's just something that has to be taken into account. There are all kinds of problems with orchestration because Schubert never heard it, particularly in using the brass section, the trombones, which he uses with great freedom. Think of how wonderful it is for a composer to get a hold of a brass instrument that can play any note you want. They don't have to just do timpani and fanfare things and whatnot, like the trumpets usually get stuck with. So there's the coda to the first movement. How do you double the instruments? Do you double the instruments? What do you do with the woodwinds? How many do you use? Should you use extra ones? It's a whole thing. The second movement is absolutely gorgeous, and it's based on, actually, the slow movement of Haydn's Drum Roll Symphony. Not many people have pointed that out, but that's what it is. It's a sort of a sense of a series of double variations that alternate, but rises to that expressionistic climax that has to be really ferocious. There's nothing in the classical repertoire that allows you to do what Schubert wants you to do at the climax of that slow movement. And again, it's a question of finding the right tempo. It's a march. and you don't want it to die, but on the other hand, it can't sound glib. The scherzo is a huge problem, the scherzo in trio, because it's incredibly long. And it's part of a larger issue, by the way, is how do you deal with repeats? That really becomes an issue in the scherzo, because if you take all the repeats of the scherzo, then it becomes the longest movement in the symphony, which is crazy. I mean, it's not, it doesn't have the melodic and developmental substance to be the longest movement in the symphony. You just feel like it's never going to stop. And so even if you love it, even if you adore it, especially the trio, which is one big long melody, to divide it in half and repeat both halves, oh my God, it's a terrible mistake. But Schubert left those repeats in. They were the standard thing to do back then. And maybe he wanted it to be very long. I don't know. But again, he never heard the symphony. So we have to be a little bit mindful of the fact that we'd be doing him a favor in creating proportions for each movement that represent the music at its best. In other words, that keep us from falling asleep. And then, of course, the finale. The finale, which goes round and round and round and round and round. Jump, ba-da-da-dump, 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 ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, like that. And the coda, which is supposed to be ferocious. There's a real threat at the end with those jump, bom, 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 those low C's with the notes, and the final chord, which some moron decided should be a diminuendo, which it obviously can't be, because it's not where the music's going. It's a triumphant ending, in spite of everything. You can't add biographical details. Oh, well, he had syphilis, therefore it's a diminuendo. I mean, it's ridiculous. Anyway, so it's a big, difficult interpretive piece. So what does that mean? What it means is that it requires a sympathetic, guiding hand on the podium. Someone who really understands it, who loves it, and who's going to treat it with the kind of intelligence and also character and give it a good shake, turn it into something. It doesn't play itself. Also, and this may be the biggest problem of all, the rhythms in the outer movements particularly can turn very mechanical. Extremely mechanical. The first movement is dump ba dump ba dump ba dump ba dump ba dump ba dump with it's got a lot of repetition of small melodic cells. The finale, of course, is yum ba da dump 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 ba da. There's a lot of rhythmic stuff, and all of that, frankly, is absolutely unsuited to the period instrument approach, which is what is happening most of the time in Schubert interpretation these days, because that approach is, first of all, mechanical. It downplays the role of the conductor. It disregards the need to intervene. The period instrument people treat music of the classical period like a wind-up toy. You just sort of crank it up and let it go. And it's all supposed to happen in one tempo. But when a piece is 55, 60 minutes long, that's not going to fly. You're going to be in a coma before you get halfway through it. And it also really benefits, the symphony does, from the sound of the modern symphony orchestra, from a big, bold string section, from as many woodwinds as you can plonk into it. To contrast, extra horns, 4 instead of 2, really makes a big difference. There are all kinds of things that you really should do with the thing in order to make it optimally performable. And those things are best suited to the modern symphony orchestra, not to period instrument groups with their scruffy little strings and squealy little woodwinds and whatnot. Maybe you could use hard sticks on the timpani and make the trumpet parts come out a little bit more. But you're really talking about trombones leading the brass section as often as not. And so having a great trombone section is a big help. And because of all the interpretive problems that the work poses, you really want to have a full-standing, regularly constituted major symphony orchestra playing it. A symphony orchestra that knows the work and that loves the work and that won't get bored with the work. So that's a problem. We don't have that today. I mean, it's really very simple. I mean, we don't have that. When you think about the great conductors of Schubert Ninth, who made recordings of it, at least, Sell and Munch, and more recently, Shandor Vague, Zubin Mehta did a good one, but they are either dead and gone, or as close as makes no difference, like, Herbert Blomstedt. There are conductors who know how to conduct that music, who know how to play it well, but they're very few, and they are of the older generation. I can't think of any new conductors who could program Schubert's Ninth Symphony, and I'd want to go hear it, except possibly Manfred Honeck. He could probably do it. I'd be very interested to see if he does do it at some point. There will always be artists, individual artists, who may be, properly constituted to put on a work like Schubert's Ninth and make it a success. But there is no group, there is no consensus, there is no common practice style available right now that I think could do the work justice. And so it will be very interesting to see as we go forward into the 21st century, because people will still make recordings. Probably they'll make recordings in the context of Schubert cycles, instead of just doing the Ninth, like most people, smart people, should do if they really love it and forget the rest. They're going to do all of the Schubert symphonies. But we see it happening. We see the horror. Jordi Savall, his Schubert. Oh my God, it's beyond horrible. It's starting already. These people who think that they can apply the strictures of the period instrument movement to a piece of the work of the classical period, no matter how extraordinary or individualistic it is, and have it come out being a good performance. Well, it doesn't work. Doesn't work at all. It's not going to work, and you heard it here first. So that's a piece to look out for as we go into the 21st century, and there will be others, and we're going to talk about them. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Get ready. Take care.